And that song, it was really just so beautiful and so perfect for today, because it really is about being so much more than this body. That our soul is so much bigger, and there's so much that we have to tap into and to become. So today we are talking about building our lives on a solid spiritual foundation. And we're going to talk about, these are based actually on two scriptures we talked about last week. Psalm 127:1, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain, which of course is, unless we build our house firmly on this solid spiritual foundation, it's like building our house on sand. The other scripture is Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. If you weren't here last week, I encourage you to get the CD or to listen online to last week's talk, because I go further into what is the kingdom. For today's purposes, we're talking about the kingdom as being the qualities that we desire to experience, that we're seeking sometimes in the outer world, that are actually already right here within us. And essentially they are the qualities of God. And we are working to come into beingness of these qualities. We talked last week about that to become is to come into being. Being is the fact of existing. It is, I am choosing to be it, and I am it. So we're really going to kind of go through this process that, we are working on becoming it. I mean, we are it, but we're working on allowing it to be that expression through us. And it does take effort, and it does take some work. And work is actually productive activity. Doesn't that feel good? Work is productive activity. And so I am choosing to be it, but at some point, my friends, we are going to get to that place where we know and we live and we move as that I am it. I am it. That just feels so good. Okay, so building the foundation, normally when we look at building a foundation, we think about something that is the bottom layer, the underneath. But for our purposes, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be building a strong foundation within us. And this is called the core. Now, at our indoor yard sale extravaganza last week, I bought a huge exercise ball and a book that went with it. And I want to share with you what this book says about the physical core of our body, and then I'm going to relate that to building a strong spiritual foundation. What is the core of the body, and why is it so important? It says, like the steel cables of a bridge, your core is the foundation and support system of your body. It stabilizes your spine and connects your upper and your lower extremities. It is the central source of power and is essential for efficient movement. Furthermore, your core is the center of gravity, playing an essential role in helping you maintain balance and equilibrium. So we can see that having a strong physical core is really important to the overall good experience of our physical life, as long as we live, because that strong core is going to help to keep us balanced and stable as we get older. So what I want to share with you now is 5 reasons from the editors of Women Health to strengthen your core. But I'm going to relate this to our spiritual core, to our life experience. Okay, number 1 is it reduces and prevents pain. Now, in this particular instance, I am going to talk about a physical thing. My former husband, years ago, was playing on the trampoline with my 2 kids. They were pretty young at the time, and he was doing this popcorn thing, and they jumped, and he broke his back. Yeah. However, he exercised all the time, and his core was so strong that everybody was amazed, including the doctors, at how quickly he recovered from this broken back, and it was directly related to the fact that he had this strong core. Okay, so that's just as true for our life experiences. When our spiritual core is strong, then things will happen in our lives, but things that used to immediately put us into a painful place, you'll find that that a lot of times they don't even take you to that place anymore. And also what you're going to find is as we strengthen this spiritual core is that even when those things happen that are bigger things in our lives, that we're going to recoup and recover quicker from them. Now, I want to tell you another example of this that is both the physical but I think it's more from this strong spiritual core, and that is Dwayne Koppler. Now, most of you know that Dwayne started out his journey to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, and this was going to take him about 6 months to hike this trail. Dwayne is currently 72 years old. And on the last portion of his hike that he was able to finish, he broke 2 bones in his foot. And so he had to come home. And so he's now essentially, home with his leg up almost all the time, recuperating. And so I asked him, so how have your spirits been? And he was like, I'm really doing okay. And he said, I'm not a big TV fan, so I'm just doing a lot of reading, catching up on, and he, again, is someone who likes to read a lot of spiritual books. But the thing that amazed me about this is, and again, it's because he has this strong spiritual core, is that Dwayne is already planning his, when he's going to start training again, and he's going to get back out there on that trail and finish it. I mean, that is awesome. And that is, my friends, is because of his spiritual core, because he has a strong, solid spiritual core. Number 2 is having a strong physical core makes you look taller and thinner. And so when we look at this from the spiritual core aspect, what I notice is that people who have a strong spiritual core, there is a change even in how they move. And the way that I would say that is it's a sense of grace. It's a movement with grace. And I think that's because when we're solid in this core, that we don't live in this place of fear and constrictedness and anger and angst where, we get kind of hunched over and it, becomes a part of our beingness. And so truly, when we have this strong spiritual core, we show up differently just in our regular movement in life. Again, I think it's a state of grace. Number 3, it delays the aging process. And I'm going to say this right now. Look at Harry Sparks. Yes. Harry Sparks is 94 years old for 2 more weeks. In 2 weeks, he's going to be 95 years old. And I'm going to tell you something. This man outdoes most of us. It amazes me. He outdoes most of us. So really, it delays the aging process. That's all I'm going to say about that. It improves mental function. Harry Sparks. And I really believe that, a lot of Harry's ability, he's just so present and so there is because Harry exercises that core all the time. This man never quits reading spiritual books. We are constantly handing him a book. Hey, Harry, you want to read this and check it out for us? He's constantly reading and taking it in, learning. He's very open, and he's also a fantastic teacher. Just as a friend to all of us, he's just a fantastic teacher. So it really does improve our mental function. Now, while I'm on Harry, I do want to remind us that in 2 weeks, Harry is going to be 95. He knows that we're going to have a birthday celebration here for him that day. After both services, there will be cake, and we encourage you and ask you to bring cards, and let's just shower him with our love and appreciation. Okay, number 5, it improves performance. Now, from a physical perspective, it says that stabilizing your core hones your fine motor skills so you can react quickly and stay balanced on unstable surfaces. And I believe that how that relates to us with a strong spiritual core is that this speaks to those situations that catch us off guard. Do you ever have any of those situations that catch you off guard? And when we're not coming from our core, we're coming from our ego. Ever do that? React in a way that later we may not be so proud of reacting. And so when we have a strong spiritual core, we're still going to react quickly. But I promise you, we're going to be much more centered in our reaction. We're going to be so strong in this this deep core that we're going to start reacting, and I like to actually use the word responding, from love and from peace and from oneness and from connection. So, as we can see, hopefully, keeping our inner core strong is even more so important to the overall experience of our life. Would you agree? Okay. So, when I talk about our spiritual core, what I want you to know is that for me, it encompasses our heart and our solar plexus. Because I know that whatever experience I'm having in my life, whether it's a fantastic experience or a kind of negative experience, my heart gets pumping and I feel it wear right here in my gut. And so we're going to be really talking about this as being our core. Now, although I believe that all the qualities of God work together to create this strong spiritual core, I do believe that there's one quality that is essential for the foundation of building this strong spiritual core, and that is faith. I think that faith is the most important thing that we can start to really exercise that muscle. And on top of that, everything else will work together. Now, note here that we're not talking about having faith. We are talking about being the presence of faith. And hopefully, as you see through this, they're two, pretty different things. So I believe that one of our greatest teachers of being the presence of faith, of course, was Jesus. As you look through Scripture, of course, as you look in the Bible in general, the whole Bible is about faith. And you can find stories of faith, all through the Bible. But I think that Jesus really represented one who truly was the very presence of faith in everything. And so we're going to look at some of those things that he was the presence of faith in. When there didn't seem to be enough food, enough fish and loaves, he was what? He was the presence of faith. How many times when people came to him and maybe they had some faith but they didn't have full faith, but they wanted to be healed, he was the presence of faith. And so some of those were, we talked about the man at the pool of Bethesda, the woman who was hemorrhaging and simply touched the hem of his garment. He was so much the presence of faith that just being around him, people's faith, it sparked that in them, and that vibration, that energy became more in them just by touching the hem of his garment. The man with the withered hand, or those who had leprosy, or those who were blind, and the paralytics that came in. He was the presence of faith in all these situations. How about the storm where the disciples and Jesus are in the boat, and the big storm comes up? What was he? He was the presence of faith. And let's talk about when he raised Lazarus from the dead. And as he's moving into that experience, he says, Father, I thank you that you always hear me. I knew that you always hear me, but I say this out loud so that other people might believe. He knew, Father, I thank you that thou hast heard me, because I know you always hear me. The Father and I are one. He was absolutely in that presence of faith. But every so often he would speak it out so that others around him could also know, hear me. This is always right here for you. And also, when we look at the story of Lazarus, one of the underlying messages of that is that even the most seemingly impossible situation, that there's still hope. And he was the presence of faith in that. But I think that the biggest story is the story of his journey from the Last Supper to the crucifixion. Because we see this man, he was the epitome of being the presence of faith. He knew what was ahead of him. And he made plans. He made sure that other people were going to be okay. And he was the absolute presence of faith in that journey. And even in those last moments when he is nailed to the cross, he is still the presence of faith as he's talking to the thieves on either side of him. And as he's saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, he also showed us that in our humanness, there are going to be moments where we're going to wail, and we're going to say, why have you forsaken me? But the beautiful thing about that story, as you look at it, is the majority of that story was what? The presence of faith. The absolute presence of faith. So, the big question is, how do we become the presence of faith? How do we become a human being faith? And so the very first thing that I think is the most important thing to do is that we need to get very clear about what it is we believe about the nature of God. Now, we talk about this a lot, but it is the most important thing for us to do. When I used to believe that God was separate from me, when I used to believe that I was a sinner, when I used to believe that God was a punishing God, when I used to believe that, my experience was in direct relation to that belief. And so it is so important for us to really tune into, well, what is it that I believe about the nature of God? Now you hopefully got a blue sheet of paper. And so these are ideas. Now, some of these are what Unity teaches and believes. Some of them are just what I believe. But these are ideas on what is it that I believe about the nature of God. God is the one and only presence and power. And before I go on, recognize that we're not only saying God is, you can put in front of that, I am. I am, okay? God is for me. God is good. God is absolute love. God is potential and possibilities. God is creator. God is infinite creativity. God is unfailing. God is in the midst of me. God is unlimited givingness. God is beauty. God is grace. God is amazing and awesome. God is non-judgmental. God is life. God is the way of forgiveness. God is change. God is unchanging law. God is personal. God is comfort. God is counselor. And I added a couple. God is mysterious, and God is the flow. And you may have more. These just kept bubbling up and bubbling up and bubbling up. But we must get very clear on what it is that we believe about the nature of God, because, my friends, this is the foundation of our core, the foundation of our faith, and we will move through life according to our belief. And so if you believe that God is for you, then it is time for us to start living our life from that perspective. If we believe there's only one presence and one power, it is time for us to start living our life from that perspective. Whatever it is that we believe about God, it is time for us to be that in expression in our life. Now, I want to share with you something that I believe moves us out of faith, something that in a way is in opposition to faith, and that is fear. So I want to read to you. I recently read an article in a magazine. I discovered this magazine. It's called Experience Life, and I love this magazine. And this particular edition was about fear. So I want to read to you what the editor, Pilar Garasimo, says about fear, because it's going to talk about our physical reaction to it as well as just how it affects our life. She said, I began reflecting on what fear means to me and how it operated in my own life. And I started by asking the question, what does fear feel like? And I got one answer: constriction. Agreed? Constriction. Whenever I'm afraid, I realized everything begins to contract. My body, my heart, my mind, my peripheral vision, my voice, my sense of possibility, it all starts to feel cramped and contained in an uncomfortable way, a way that makes me feel and act smaller than I really am. Again, do you relate to that? She goes on to say, this is the insidious part of fear. It makes us shrink and recoil when often what we are really being confronted with is an opportunity to grow. Fear inclines us to be far less capable and generous than we normally are, and to see far fewer possibilities than we might otherwise see. Out of our constricted thought and behavior comes a compromised result. This convinces us that we are, in fact, not all that smart or strong or deserving, and we go on to make even smaller choices and to live ever more shrunken and in shriveled ways. I loved that because I could relate to it. I thought, my gosh, that is so true, that when I am in fear, everything shrinks. Everything gets smaller. And when that gets smaller, guess what? I start showing up in life smaller. I start, possibilities start to decrease in my life. So the second thing that I'm going to invite you to do this week is to become aware of when you find yourself in fear. Now, how are you going to know you're in fear? You're going to feel it, because you're going to go, you're going to constrict. You're going to feel it in your heart, and you are going to feel it in your gut. And in those moments that you feel fear, just stop and breathe. Stop and breathe. And then consciously say to yourself, I am a human being, faith. Now, we're going to use some statements to exercise that muscle. So you might want to use a statement like, I am the presence of God in this situation as potential and possibilities. I am the presence of God as hope. I am the presence of God as unfailing. I am the presence of God as being for me. So these are things that are going to help alleviate that big feeling of fear, and these are statements that will help move us from fear to faith. Again, what are we going back to here? We're going back about what we believe about the nature of God. That's why that is the most important thing that we can do right now, is get very clear on that. Because our statements are going to come out of, well, what do I believe about the nature of God? And if I believe it, by golly, I'm going to start showing up as that. I'm going to start living that. I'm going to start being the presence of that. I'm going to start being the presence of faith, in my life, period. So each week, what I want you to know is I'm going to try and make your homework easy and practical, something that you can easily integrate into your daily experience, but I want to encourage you to do it. Because the only way that we are going to implement change and to create this solid foundation is to do the work that is ours to do. So again, number one is we wake up in the morning, I am a human being, faith. Today, I am a human being, faith. And what does that mean to me? Perhaps you're moving into something in your day. Perhaps you're going to be with family, or you're going to be in some type of litigation. I am a human being, the presence of love. I am a human being, the presence of possibilities. And so use those statements. Then the second thing is that when you find yourself in fear, okay, breathe, breathe, breathe. Usually not breathing because you're constricted, okay? Breathe. I'm a human being, faith. And I'm the presence of possibilities and potential. I'm the presence of hope, okay? Easy, 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 right? Are you on board? Okay. So we're going to close with these two statements, and I'm going to invite you to say them with me. I believe in the person that I am becoming, and I am a human being, faith. And so it is, and so it shall be. Namaste, namaste.